Welcome. I guess I don't really know how to do an introduction here because you are either watching a video recording of this conversation or you're listening to this on the Video Essay podcast. So I guess I'll address the podcast listener because I need more of a transition, I guess. But I'm joined here by someone who truly needs no introduction, Kevin B. Lee, who would be like on the Mount Rushmore of video essayists, I would say. And I feel, Kevin, that I need to do a short little preface because unfortunately for listeners of the podcast, you are not here to have a standard interview conversation, which we are going to do. And we've been talking about it for a while. And I'll just tease it here that Kevin and I have some plans for a very fun, big, epic conversation that I have a ton of notes and questions that Kevin doesn't even know about yet. So we're going to try and surprise him, ask him. The problem with preparing to interview Kevin is he's done so many interviews that you kind of got to watch them all and like look for the gaps. So that's what I'm trying to do. But I think this interview here will be a first because I don't think you've had time to talk about what we're going to talk about here today yet. And that is Kevin is in the process of developing basically a master's program of his own at the institution he teaches at in Germany. But before we get to that, Kevin, I think it could be good to get a little slice of biography here in the sense that there may be people listening or watching who don't even know that you live in Germany or who don't know that you are a professor of Crossmedia Publishing, which we'll get into what exactly that is. So I guess my first question is, give us, I guess, a condensed timeline of how you got to Germany, where you are now, and what your current role is.
Okay, sure. Thanks, Will, and thanks for having me in this new kind of multimodal form of the Video Essay podcast, kind of breaking new ground. So yeah, it was in 2017, I had been invited to be a resident at the Harun Farokhi Institute in Berlin as an artist in residence. And that was my first time living in Europe, in Germany. It was just supposed to be a 3-month thing. And then it led to a series of speaking engagements, one of which was at the Merz Akademie in Stuttgart. And they invited me to do a workshop in video essays and also give a lecture about my history and practice with video essays. And this lecture actually is on Vimeo. I think if you just Google Kevin Lee video essays Merz Akademie, you might be able to find it. I don't know if I can.
We'll embed to it too on thevideoessay.com when we post this as well. So
yeah,
I'll go search for it as well.
Okay, sure. I mean, I can even. It's funny because we're doing this live as a video thing, and I've got my desktop in front of me. So I wonder if.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
I don't know if you can edit out the lag time, but I will just go ahead and just do a quick search. Yeah, I'll follow my own advice. And it's a significant talk because this talk basically got me a job. So it's also like if you want to see what a successful job talk is like. So yeah, I can point you to this as an example. So okay, I'm gonna go ahead and screen share really quick.
You never know where.
Yeah. Here's my desktop. Do you see Macaulay Culkin? Yeah, this is my
holiday
theme. Yes. Yeah. Bring a little bit of.
It's the little things.
Exactly. We got to make every moment of screen space count. So yeah, it's here, the 10th anniversary of video essays. So I gave this talk about my background in video essays. I gave a workshop on video essays with some really great work. I can even pull up an image of that, which is on my website. Let's see if I can just. Yeah, so right here, if you go to my website, I have a section on teaching. And I just found this, I just was looking for this before we got on, and I just found this interesting that I was already sharing the results of the workshop. And if you can see it clearly enough, what the students were working on, there was, stuff about movies, time travel, your typical kind of, there was even a video essay about Roland Emmerich. So I'm like, okay, wow, everything in cinema is possible, even shitty filmmakers. But then stuff about Hitler's appearances on YouTube makeup tutorials, and Instagram stories. And this was actually the first time that I was engaged in video essays dealing with things other than film. And so that was exciting to me. Yeah, I mean, because the thing is, I was working with students who weren't necessarily film students. There were also students in visual communications and new media, so they weren't so film nerdy as the people that you and I typically have encountered in video essay circles. And so this was a transitional moment for me. This is 2017, and since then I've just become increasingly interested in video essay practice outside of film studies. And it definitely reflects something about Merz Akademie. Merz Akademie is an interdisciplinary school. It's a small school. It's a very charming campus with about 200 students. Let me see if I can pull up a little homepage of the website. And yeah, it's great because there aren't so many students, even though there are basically 4 study areas: film, video, visual communications, new media, and cross media. So it has kind of an inherently interdisciplinary aspect to it, because the school is so small that these study areas end up encountering each other and informing each other. And what I do at Cross Media, I was hired as a professor of cross media, and I feel like cross media really embodies this intersection of different media practices. So when I was, when I gave this talk, they informed me, oh, we actually have an open position that we're trying to fill, professor of cross media publishing. And I asked them, wow, that's exciting. But at the risk of potentially disqualifying myself, what exactly is cross media publishing? Because I've never heard of this term before. and they said, well, we're not exactly sure ourselves, but we felt like we needed to design a study area that somehow fills a gap that the other study areas are not quite covering. Something that has to do with contemporary publishing practices that may be related to journalism or storytelling. And what we see what you're doing with video essays on YouTube that are, on the one hand, engaging with film video, but somehow translating film history and film knowledge to a new media context, which is online media and social media. And so this to us somehow in some ways describes what cross media is. I'm like, okay, that's good enough for me. So I gave a presentation. I laid out an idea for what cross media, a cross media curriculum that really puts greater emphasis on content, on critical engagement with content, because I would say the other study areas are more focused on disciplinary principles of design, of craft. Film video is very much about how you make a film, how you how you direct, how you stage things. New media is about really having a true appreciation of coding, of interface design, visual communication, like graphic design, layouts, things like that. And on my side, my emphasis is more on, okay, you have all these skills. Now, what do you want to apply these skills towards? Not just taking orders from a manager or a client, but really asking yourself, like, what's interesting to you that you want to interrogate, that you want to explore? Because that to me is how video essays have operated. It was always a means to facilitate a deep exploration of what I found most interesting and most worth understanding with regards to film, and now the larger spectrum of media that we are in now. So so for me, it's about topics that you want to engage in deeply and critically, stories that you want to tell, and how you design your interrogation exploration so that other people can come along with you. And that's, for me, that's primarily through video essays. And, since I'm regarded as an expert in that, that's definitely something that I offer as students as a model. But I think there's way more options for students to engage with. So, if you want to design a website that has that kind of exploratory, interrogatory, or investigative approach to your subject, then how do you do that? If you design a poster, how do you do that? Or a visual, what do you call it? A graphic or data visualization infographic. If you want to make a film that's not a video essay, but still have that kind of criticality to it. Yeah. So I find that this general approach is super interesting. And in this past semester, I've now been invited to be the co-head or co-director of the master's project, along with David Quigley, who has a strong background in essay films and expanded cinema. So I feel like between the two of us, we have a natural affinity towards, well, film and media on the one hand, but also a critical and theoretical appreciation of how film can be used, not just
Right.
film theory, but practicing theory through film.
Right.
So I think between the two of us, we really have a strong potential. I'm just going to go ahead and share a quick. Yeah. So here, get this on the window. Yep. So here he is. And so he's been leading the master's program for several years now. And now we're kind of working together to really give the department a stronger orientation towards an intermedial or cross-medial emphasis, using the principles that I just described to you, with video essays as one approach, but video essays as an embodiment of this larger model of critical engagement with media practice, using media as a way to have deeper and more fulfilling engagements with your subject of interest,
Right.
and using it as a way to find new networks, new platforms. Because with my own experience with video essays, it was like using YouTube as a new kind of opportunity. But I mean, this was back in 2007. It was a newly available platform, and so how do you take advantage of resources and platforms that present themselves to you within a particular moment? Just like
Right.
you're making great use of podcasting to kind of take video essays in a new direction, and that's very exciting. It's something I find to be a tremendous step forward for video essay studies and the culture in general. So it's like every moment in history has its has specific opportunities and affordances that we just need to be able to see and know how to engage with. So
Right.
that's another thing I really want to help students think deeply about.
Right. And who is, you've just touched on it in that answer.
Mhm.
Who is what's the typical profile for a student? Because I guess it's just kind of a two-part question, because I think this term of creative or practice research, it's not a term that I had really encountered until I went and studied in Europe.
Mm.
And in fact, in one of the video essay Facebook groups, I don't know if you saw this the other day, but someone had posted, they wanted to do an audiovisual dissertation for a PhD, and their university would not accept it. And so they were trying to get feedback, is this something that could be done in the United States? And the answer was it's kind of maybe starting to be done in the United States, but not really, whereas it's perhaps far more common in Europe. And I know it's very common in the United Kingdom. So I guess this is kind of a two-part question, because that requires a little bit of context, because I'm wondering, had you encountered this term of kind of practice or creative research beforehand? And I guess for someone who may not be familiar with it, what is it? And the
Mm.
reason I ask that is because I think there's this, it seems to me from what you've said, is that there's a mix of students who might enroll in a program like yours, where it might be students who are interested in being artists, but it might be students who are also interested in perhaps learning more of a trade, maybe,
Mm.
if that's the correct way of putting it, meaning that they want to work professionally as a graphic designer. Not that there's not art involved in that, but I think there's a little bit of a difference there. And then it seems like the underlying thing is that someone who would enroll in this course would want to be like a content creator, whatever that
Mm.
means.
Right.
That's my kind of rambly question to kind of set the stage for you
No,
to
I
take the
definitely see the
baton and run
connections
with it.
there.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No, and I also would love to hear your experiences. I mean, you went to I would just say a very prestigious or very noteworthy master's program, and so I'm curious how those questions applied to your experience or how you saw it. But speaking for myself, yeah, I mean, I had the benefit of getting my master's. I got an MFA and a master's and MA in visual and critical studies at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, which was just a really, really fantastic program. And they very much have this interdisciplinary sort of artistic research model. So, I got an MFA, which is very much a studio based degree, but even in the MA, which is typically a more academic practice, uh, students were encouraged to explore their research topic through creative means, whether through painting or illustration or filmmaking or web design. So I made a video exploration of LED lights in China as my MA practice. My MFA was Transformers the Pre-Make, which in itself you could say was a form of artistic research because I was investigating this topic of global blockbuster production. And I was writing papers, I was writing texts about it, but my ultimate product was this video essay. So it poses very interesting possibilities and questions of modes of research, um, textual based research publication versus video or installation or other art forms, how knowledge is produced. um and it's the question of jobs, which of course is very practical, is super important. It's interesting because I think in some ways this artistic research turn, it happened over the last 20 years or so. um I think it's one reason why Harun Farokhi became such a big deal around the 90s, because he had been a scholar, a theorist, critic, and filmmaker for a couple decades before that. And then when the art world started showing more interest in video and filmmaking in the 90s, he kind of was invited to present himself as an artist. Um, but I think it's also, so on the one hand, it's like art and research being increasingly exposed to a greater range of possibilities for how one can practice, because filmmaking and media and video have just become more and more available and more prolific. um, I think it's also a way for art to justify itself or to reassert its value within an increasingly technocratic economy. I mean, I'm not gonna lie here. I mean, I think in an age where like STEM programs and science has tremendous kind of authority or centrality with regard to like where research budgets are going, and it needs to be considered useful research, because humanities funding has really um, been quite challenged over the last
Yeah.
20 or 30 years. So in some ways it's a tactical move to like align artistic practice to what can be considered useful research. And
Right.
I kind of go both ways about that. I think that I don't think humanities should have to justify itself along those lines. I mean, and I think our society, our culture should have a greater appreciation of things that aren't like bottom line useful. You know what I mean?
Right. Of
But
course.
it creates a very interesting dialogue or debate. But
Yeah.
whatever the case, you know, at least with something like video essays, it provides a very fascinating ground for how knowledge gets produced in a way that can be deemed useful, and useful knowledge on the one hand, uh, because the knowledge then is articulated in a way that somehow engages an audience to a
Right.
greater capacity than a text. I mean, you
Right.
definitely see this in academia, where like I know, and you probably know, scholars whose video essays circulate much more widely than their books or their, you know,
Oh, of
or the
course.
text that they
Yeah.
publish, right? So if you want to talk about utility, right? So there's that.
One thing I've
Yeah.
also noticed is like I've gone and sometimes I go to someone's like CV or something, and they like link to maybe a journal article and like the link's dead, or I can't, or like there's something wrong with the database or doesn't work. Whereas with the Vimeo or YouTube, even if you do get it published in like an in transition, say, you still have agency over the Vimeo file. So you have greater control. So the accessibility aspect is
Wow.
part of
That's
why
a,
it gets seen, you know?
oh man. Okay. You're opening a whole door into like just what's wrong with like contemporary academic publishing, which,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not so engaged with that, but
How
I've
much time do
definitely,
you have? Yeah, it's a
I've
million.
heard stories
I don't
and
even know. I know nothing, and I know that it's really there's a ton of
right.
problems with it. So,
You probably
uh,
have future guests coming who have been personally affected by that. So yeah. So
um,
yeah, people
but
in the
anyway, I cut
academic
you
field.
off.
Oh no,
Yeah,
no, but I mean, well, I mean, it does tie back to the whole thing about careers and jobs, and
right,
yeah, I mean, well, you know, what my one trump card I could play is, you know, hashtag 2020 has changed everything. We know we can assume about jobs, you know, and this is
right,
actually something I'm very, very deeply invested in, creating an arena for me and students and colleagues to collectively explore those questions, to really ask the necessary questions. Well, first of all, identify what are the necessary questions with regard to economy, to labor, to the environment, to media, that, you know, the COVID pandemic has just kind of thrown into question.
yeah,
How can we, you know, how can we understand and recognize what's at stake with all of these, and what are the new approaches, strategies, and resources that we can engage with, that we can
right,
start to work with in the face of that, you know. And speaking for myself, you know, the most successful career options I've had are ones that I've designed myself, you know, for whatever
right,
reason. And, you know, maybe we can get into that in the longer conversation to come. But long story
right,
short, like yeah, the jobs that kind of pre-existed that I applied for have never been as fulfilling, either personally or even yeah, monetarily, as like things that I've come to devise myself, things that didn't quite exist, you know. And again, I look to you as an example with like Video Essay Podcast. This does not exist before, and now it's really the thing that you know, that I very closely associate with your practice, like that helps define you. And so
right.
that's a, you know, and so that's the kind of thing I would want to be teaching my students to kind of design. So you're kind of like a model, you're a model student already.
Thank you. um, well, actually, so I lied to you. I said I didn't have anything to share on the screen. I'm wondering if you could pull it up for me. If you were to pull up my newsletter, because
Oh
I
yeah.
wrote an essay a couple days ago that touches on exactly what you talk about, which is it's the videoessay.substack.com. And I wrote about practicality because I was asked to kind of address some of the questions that you just mentioned in speaking with a couple groups of students um, about video essay, and particularly this kind of like the utility of it, which is like such a awful way of talking about it, as you just said.
Right. And
Uh,
that's another thing is like, you know, when people say, oh, I need, can you help me find a job? And let's just, you know, can we just like get that done? I think it's important to push back a little bit and have a moment of critical hesitation. That's a term that Allison DeFriend introduced to me. And I think
mm,
it's a great term to like, before you just rush into something, take a moment to ask yourself
right,
why, like, or
right,
really like, what's at stake here?
right.
Yeah. So anyway, so here
Yeah,
we
no,
are.
and
Mhm.
yeah, there we are. And in that essay practicality, I was trying to touch on some of these questions that you just mentioned, particularly in the sense that with humanity, you know, I think we're the as much as we don't want the humanities to kind of fall into the more I mean, it's just like I don't want to insult anybody, so it's hard to say, but I guess like,
Mm.
you know, this push by the university to have everything, every major translate directly into a job and into an income, which a lot of people need. Hey, I need it. I have a ton of student loan debt and everything. So I'm like in that boat. So, but it seems to me that video essay is a happy balance in the sense that for me, I was kind of trying to answer the question, like, why should you take a video essay course? It was kind of how I was trying to answer it in my head. And video essay course, but I think could also be applied to the course that Kevin's teaching and just cross media in general. And this idea that it's kind of this 3-layered thing, and I'm sure there are more, which is you get, let's say you actually want to be a video essayist. Okay, then that's why you should take the course. Let's say you don't want to be a video essayist, but you're interested in film in some way, whether you want to be a critic, a filmmaker, or like when I was in the master's program at Cambridge, I won't say the name, but we had a very high level Hollywood producer come and talk to us who got an MA in cinema studies from NYU. And he was like, he did his thesis on like Maya Deren, like is a very into like avant-garde American cinema. And he said that was like a formative experience for him and helped him all along the way because he had an understanding of film that a lot of people don't, right? Like he could do the business of film, but also could read a script and know what was good, what was going to work. And that helped him. And then the third tier is that you are learning video editing, right? So, or you're learning maybe After Effects or Adobe Audition or InDesign, or, I know I'm listing all the Creative Cloud products, but whatever, any other program that
Yeah,
you
this
could
this podcast brought to you by, I
Yeah, I
think
know,
maybe
seriously.
you've got a sponsor there.
Hey, seriously, if they want to sponsor me, I'm more than happy to. Actually, I'd be happy if they just waived my friggin' $30 or $40 a month fee or whatever it is.
Right.
I'd be happy with that. But then you have a skill that you could then translate into other things. And one of the interesting things about, and I talk about this in the short blog post, but now that I've done the Video Essay podcast for over a year, you start to pick up trends, and we have people who work as freelance trailer editors for Netflix, or who do freelance editing on the side as their main income or supplementary income, and the YouTube channel kind of helps get them new clients for that. So it's this kind of multi-layered thing where one isn't necessarily better than the other, but at the end of the day, it is promoting humanistic inquiry, if that's a term I can use. So I do think that is a benefit in the long run. And the other thing I would say is, which I think is slightly different, and I'd be curious to hear what you think about this, is that, so I went to Middlebury College, as I'm sure people know if you're familiar with me, and I took the video essay course taught by Jason Mattel. And I posted my final video essay to Vimeo pretty much right away when I finished the course, because I just kind of wanted to have it out there. I was probably applying to some job and figured it'd look good, like in my portfolio, like if on like my blog or my website or whatever I had at the time. And I just tagged on Vimeo video essay. That got picked up by Jacob Aller, who at the time was writing for Film School Rejects. And he wrote a short piece on it for Film School Rejects. And then a month later, Film School Rejects opened up editorial internship applications. And my internship application, I put the video, I was like, hey, PS, I made a video essay that you guys wrote about. And I had been previously rejected to the internship before, but this time I was accepted. And that has really opened up a ton of doors for me. That was where I started writing video essay guides, which caught the attention of like people like Katie Grant. And so it's just been this snowball effect. And that's a long way of saying that by the end of my time at Middlebury, I became a big believer of focusing my academic works on things that I could then make publicly available, like when possible, which has that kind of like shitty utility aspect to it, but also because I felt like it made me care about the work more, and it made it better because I was like, oh, people will see this. And I think that's such an important aspect of video essay making. And I'm wondering, and it seems to me that in a lot of practice research, creative research type programs, like with you with Transformers, the premiere or whatever, like the end result is typically something that you would like make public. And I'm wondering if that's a component of the program that you're thinking about, and how does that, I guess, kind of shape how you think about this whole realm of humanities research, and how you, I guess, would structure a curriculum. Like, is that a component that you think is important? And like, in your experience, do students find that exciting, or are they like, I could also imagine being really turned off by it, like, holy shit, I have to put this out to the world. Like, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. That's it's such a rich question, and my first instinct is, yeah, of course. I mean, it
Yeah.
definitely speaks to my own background, and the success or the moments of fulfillment that I enjoyed with my work were very much when I felt like I was connecting to, whether it was an audience of thousands or hundreds of thousands through a video that I made that went viral, or just even a handful of people who saw something that wasn't so like mainstream, but really expressed in a way that was personally very fulfilling for me. And five people see it and they understand what I'm getting at.
Right.
But either way, it really gets to the question of, yeah, who are you making it for? And this is why cross media publishing, that's why the word publishing is in it. It's like
Right.
it is about, now that we are in an age of kind of ubiquitous publishing, like
Right.
social media is basically made us into publishers, and publishing has become kind of a default mode of contemporary life, for better or
Right.
worse. I mean, it's definitely something to be critically examined. It's not, just
Yeah.
because it's the new normal doesn't mean it's good, but just that because it has this ubiquity, it needs to be addressed one way or another. So that becomes
Right.
like a defining topic for every student to have to come to their own terms, their own definition of like, okay, what does this afford them? If publishing is something you want to engage in, what are the resources and the avenues available to you? Or how do you find the right avenues and options for you? And if you're not invested in cultivating a public around your practice, then what else is there?
Right.
But at least to lay out all those options in front of a student, which I don't think a lot of graduate programs, frankly, are either cognizant of. Either they don't, whether because they're just not so engaged in social media contexts, their professors haven't really been engaging in that, because they're just like more rooted in a more traditional academic context that doesn't care about social media,
Right.
or like online publishing, or they look at it critically and disparagingly. It's like, oh, that's so, I don't know, lowbrow or whatever.
Yeah.
But for me, because it has been so vital to my own background, and it is something that I see as so ubiquitous among the Gen Zs and millennials that I've worked with as students. Like
Right.
it's the thing that we all have to deal with one way or another. So I'm making that into like a core consideration of what the students need to come to terms with in their own way. So yeah.
So would a student need to, like, would part of a project be discussing how, like, would part of your curriculum require that a student come up with a publishing plan? Or that sounds like so like boring, but I mean, like, would, like, just critically thinking through how would they find their audience for it
Mhm.
across a series of platforms? Like, is that what you mean?
Yeah, if only
Or
as a thought. Yeah, if only as a thought experiment. I mean, at some
yeah.
point, they do have to ask yourself. You kind of ask yourself, what does this work for? And maybe in the
Right.
past, maybe with other graduate programs, it's like you write a paper, and the paper gets graded, and that's it.
Right.
And a
Yeah.
story. And the thing is, I
Right.
personally have witnessed so many instances where a student, like not just master's students or grad students, but bachelor students, they'll make a video essay for a class, and then just on their own whim, it's like, oh, I did this, but it feels like kind of relevant, like it feels kind of connected to like things I see on YouTube or Vimeo. So what if I just post it out there? And the next thing you
Right.
know, it has this audience that, and it, I can name people like Jesse McGough, like, the first video that got attention for her was this assignment she made in a class. I think it's even acknowledged in this video essay made by Ian Garwood, who was her professor at the University of Glasgow. This one called something about the significance of the voice in videographic criticism and scholarship.
Yeah. Yeah. Great
And it was
essay.
talking
Yeah.
about how, yeah, and he tells a story in that video about how Jesse had made that Branson video in class and then posted it on Vimeo, and then IndieWire picked it up, and next thing she knows, like now she's a practicing video essayist. So it's there, and I think programs need to acknowledge that the academic world is not sealed off to itself. And
Right.
I would even question its centrality. And again, it gets into larger issues of neoliberalism and how digital technologies and industries have thoroughly disrupted the academic and educational institutions in terms of how knowledge is produced, how knowledge is circulated. But yeah, that's the elephant in the room, and you can't just ignore it. So I would definitely want this program to confront those questions head on and ask
Right.
ourselves, like, how do we make sense of academic research and practices and careers in this reality that we find ourselves in.
Right.
Just to add a little something to that, I'll go back to the screen share. Um, I think some of the modes of practice that we're talking about um, speak to this very well, specifically because it's COVID. It's a COVID world we're living in. So like in my website, well, first of all, I just welcome everyone to my website, also like life.com. And yeah, and then, and I just redesigned this. We could talk about it in the next interview that we have, but
Oh, trust me,
yeah,
we will. We will.
yeah, I mean, I've really had to take,
It's awesome.
I redesigned this during quarantine. I really, like a lot of people, I used COVID as a moment of kind of self reflection, reevaluation, and definition. And it's like, okay, you know what? I really gotta embrace the hashtags, the hashtags that will follow me to my grave. Like this was what will be etched on my tombstone. Video essays, desktop, cinema, and cross media. I mean, these are the things I
Real
guess I'm
quick,
most proud of. Mhm.
what platform did you use for this? It looks great.
Oh, it's Squarespace. It's nothing
Squarespace?
terribly
Okay.
like, yeah.
The 4
Yeah,
quadrants on your tombstone. I like
yeah,
that.
4 quadrants on my tombstone. Exactly. It's going to look exactly like this. And yeah, and following that, it's like, okay, this is what I have to offer the world, as a teacher, as a practitioner. So although the practice is broadly defined, it's meant to be artistic research. And so it's like, you don't have to be making video per se. And, if you're working with me and if you're interested in web design or, um, visual communications, graphic design, or even filmmaking that's not video essays and documentaries, that's fine. I think the principles still apply, but at the same time, yeah, I'm here. So if you are interested in video essays and desktop documentaries and other digital essayistic research practices, I really can think of no better place or very few better places than working with me at Merz Akademie, especially when these forums have gained significant relevance for understanding life during and after the COVID-19 pandemic, partly because like these are some of the few like really accessible and viable modes of video production available when you're in lockdown. So like I taught video essays and desktop documentaries during quarantine, and the results were amazing.
Mhm.
So yeah, so part of it is pragmatic, but because it was a pragmatic solution to a very real limited situation and challenge we're all dealing with, it actually provides a model for anyone to think about, okay, what are the pragmatic resources available to me with whatever it is I want to do, and how do I make use of them?
Mm.
So, and this is just a very fundamental question that we all need to ask ourselves,
Right.
in terms of redefining artistic research or career development or whatever.
Absolutely. And if you're listening to this audio, there'll be links to everything that Kevin is mentioning on the webpage. But
Right.
I'm going to ask you a tough question now, which is me literally just like playing like devil's advocate or some awful term. Let's say like Frost Nixon or something, which is like, so if anyone has ever heard me talk about video essay, and I'm sure a bunch of other people, like the thing I like most about it is how accessible it is, in the sense that as long as you, like I thought Nelson Carvajal did a great job of talking about this in our interview 2 episodes ago. I'm not sure what exactly, whatever reason, in November. And about how anyone with a laptop and access to any type of editing software and YouTube and whatever can like make something happen. There's very few barriers to entry as long as you can get access to some basic technology, which of course not everyone has access to. But so why would someone do a master's in this? Like what is the, I don't want to say benefit, again, this like neoliberal
Mhm.
type terminology to it, but I think you know the
Mm.
question that I'm asking.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. I mean, I totally embrace the democratic aspect of that. And I've definitely practiced it and benefited from myself. Nobody told me to make a video essay. I just kind of intuitively fell into it back in like 2006 or 2007. I had a blog where I was looking at, great films of all time from this canonical list I was following, and I was
Hmm.
blogging about each film, and then YouTube was available, so I started posting clips on YouTube and embedding them on the website, and I was like, oh wait, if I could actually like take the text from my blog entry and narrate it in the video clip, and then I can combine the text and the video and upload that to YouTube. So, wow, that's cool. It was an organic process of kind of
Right,
evolving based on, yeah. So, nobody, like, that just sort of happened.
right,
But the thing is that what the next step was, though, was having deep engagements, because I was like, okay, I can do this on my own, or I can also start to invite other people as collaborators. And I started like contacting people like Matt Zoller Seitz, Richard Brody, Vadim Rizov at Filmmaker, who's now at Filmmaker, asking them what film would you want to talk about, and we started collaborating on these together. And with each collaboration, I just got a deeper knowledge. Yeah, and still, and you can
right,
still do this on your own, but with the Merz Academy program, you will have instantly that kind of collaborative and mentoring environment available to you, starting with me as a professor. And so it's twofold. It's like providing that collaboration, that community, that mentoring, which then allows you to really accelerate the process probably much faster than you would on your own, or at least it's
right,
encouraging you to take full advantage of the circumstances that this program provides you. And yeah, and just really practicing that skill, practicing what collaboration is,
right,
so that beyond the project, beyond the program, you have that with you, and that'll carry you much further.
right.
So yeah, I mean, we've received applications so far since I made the initial announcement about my involvement in the program. Some are definitely attracted to the prospect of living and working in Germany or in Europe, as opposed to being in the U.S. I mean, things I don't know how people feel right now at this moment, but it was before the election. It was definitely grim, and people were like, oh, I really can't wait to get out of the U.S. I mean, now
Yeah,
the pandemic is just as bad, but if not worse.
right,
But in any case, if people just want a new environment in which to practice, yeah, the Merz Academy is a great environment. It's a small school. The campus has this kind of movie version of a college campus feel to it, if I can describe it. Yeah, it's small and everybody knows each other. So I mean, that's one thing I really love about teaching there, is I basically know everybody. So there's this great sense of familiarity and intimacy to the program that, well, living in lockdown definitely means a lot, because it's just
yeah,
something about something about meaningful social bonds. So and I think you went to Middlebury, Will, so I think you might know what I
right,
mean. I think it's a
right,
huge difference between studying at Middlebury and studying at, like, a huge, like, state university with like tens of
right.
thousands of students. So we have that to offer. And yeah, and through that kind of closeness, you can have a deeper engagement with topics and with the relationships and networks that those topics connect to. So yeah, so I think that's something very special about the program that just kind of doing it on your own or having a day job might not necessarily grant you.
Yeah, absolutely. I of course agree, and completely with what you said. And I think, yeah, I mean, I I, I can't remember the I think Jenny Oslan-Kolosky is her name. She was a participant at the Middlebury workshop in 2017. I remember I asked a group of people, like, because it's kind of unusual for Middlebury, for a small liberal arts college like Middlebury, to be like, to have a huge National Endowment for the Humanities grant to fund this big innovative research. I mean, humanities is different than sciences, and of course, all sorts of innovative, exciting research goes on at Middlebury. But I think you understand what I mean by that. Like, it's not a research institute. It's not an R1 research institution.
Mm.
And she said, "Oh, well, actually, I think it makes perfect sense for Middlebury, a school like Middlebury, to house this, because it is that intimate collaboration, that back and forth, that really facilitates video essay making so well." And I was like, "Wow, you're so right." And sounds like Merz Academy is similar to that. And to your point about, like, in looking at some of the things you've written about the course, that it will blend like critical theory and media theory and all these other things apart from just like the production of video essay. Like, for me, when I took the video essay course at Middlebury for the first time, that was also when I was introduced to Alfred Hitchcock, and it was like this blend of, like, there he is right there, but like, it's this like blend of creative energy that made me excited to like want to do video essay stuff. So I think that's also, like, for me, why learning in an academic context is so exciting, because you're able to pull from all these other exciting things that you're learning at the same time, that inherently like fuel the video essay creation.
Right.
So
I think, yeah, actually Middlebury actually provides a model. I'm really struck and inspired by what Jason Mattel and Christian Keithley, your professors at Middlebury, have done, kind of mobilizing resources to create a fantastic program in video essay research and production, with undergrad students doing outstanding work.
right.
I mean, it's really provided a lot of food for thought, and and this fantastic curriculum that they actually make publicly available through their website, which I've definitely cribbed notes from when I've been teaching video essays myself. Videographic Pechakucha for life. So
Yeah.
yeah, and even your podcast website has those prompts as exercises. So that's really fantastic that you've made that methodology like more openly available. It's very generous and very empowering. So yeah, so I would love to devise something that's as defining. I mean, yeah, why not? Like, I've been very deeply invested in video essays for over a decade now. I would love to, I really want to devise a signature program that really takes my own background and my own understanding of the form, working with motivated and enthusiastic students who want to really accomplish something with it. And yeah, I mean, another model that I take a lot of inspiration from is the Harvard Sensory Ethnography Lab that Lucian Kessling-Taylor founded. I think it was over a decade ago, maybe 2 decades ago, that really kind of cemented itself. It really put a stamp on documentary practice and kind of redefined documentary practice based on a very concrete and deeply felt set of principles about what documentary should or should not be, and was able to bring together students who were committed to that as well, or really wanted to realize their own practices through those principles. I think this is what great programs need to do at this point, because there are so many artistic research practice programs out there. I mean, it really started in the mid 90s and took on a life of its own for, due to factors that we had discussed earlier, based on like, making use of the new like technocratic ideologies that are, influencing the humanities research and practice. But it has become a bit diluted, or let's just say it's become so familiar that it becomes generic. And I think now is a very important moment to reassert and revitalize what exactly do we mean by artistic research. Like, again, to what end? for me, it's always about to what end. It's like, okay, you've got a film program, but what makes your film program special, or what really is the philosophy behind it, and what do you want it to accomplish? So yeah, so I've based on my own experiences, my own practices, it really is putting a more specific and purposeful stamp onto the general artistic research proposition, based on the lessons I've learned through video essays and desktop documentary practice.
And what is, that was going to be kind of my next question, which is what is one like specific, and maybe you've just touched on it, I guess, but what's one specific, I guess, gap in the in academia, in this kind of practice research realm that you've seen, and that you hope that this program, I guess, aims and attempts to fill? And I guess another way of phrasing that would be, apart from you and everything else, like what is someone who enrolls in this program, what are they not going to get elsewhere? And I guess I don't mean like in terms of like you like I mean in terms of literally like the curriculum itself, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know so much about other programs.
That's true. Yeah,
I
we
want to
should
make like
just
generalizations.
Yeah.
I mean, otherwise, I could like kind of construct a bogeyman. And I mean, I definitely have things that I have observed. I've definitely observed things that from my own experiences as a grad student and as a professor, that I could just sort of generalize as recognizing the gaps. Like you just said, what are the gaps? I think that one gap is just not being able to see the gaps. And okay, to use an example, there is this method of teaching in Germany called the Frontalunterricht, which means frontal teaching or frontal presentation. It's basically like your classic lecture model of how to teach, where someone is standing and delivering a lecture that's been prepared and basically reading a text for the most part. And the students basically listen and take notes. So it's basically like a script that the professor delivers. And this model, I find, has really exposed itself as outmoded or ineffective in the era of Zoom lessons. Like from what I've heard, students tell me, "Oh my God, I had to listen to this like 2-hour lecture on Zoom where someone's basically reading a script."
Yeah.
And it's just like it was numbing. It wasn't engaging, and I'm basically like here to like write notes or perform, and something was just really absent about it. And then I teach in a more like American seminar style. It's just more conversational, more Socratic. It's like I'm asking questions of the students and getting them to like respond and to think. And for German students, it's quite disruptive and puts them on the spot. It's like, oh, I have to say something. I remember one time I asked the students a question, and then one of the students, after like an awkward pause, the students were like, "Aren't you going to tell us the answer?" And you know what I mean? And it's, the thing is like that makes sense if you are used to the Frontalunterricht method, where the professor is the dispenser of knowledge and you're just a recipient of it. But you went to liberal arts college, Will, so you probably know what I'm talking about, where it's more about provoking the students to think for themselves, to kind of be put in that awkward position of not knowing and having to search for the answer or the possibility of the answer, which when you're in real life suddenly becomes the new norm. Like, okay, life doesn't always give you the answers, and you kind of have to find your own way sometimes. So so that's really provided me with a lot of room to explore in terms of like, what does it mean to teach in COVID times? Like, you just can't take these things for granted. Like, what's really at stake? Which is why I kind of have this layout, this mise en scène, which is just kind of meant to create a mood, or it's not perfect, but it's like kind of presenting some questions about, okay, wow, this is interesting to look at, or like, what's going on here.
It's much better than the standard bookshelf that's like, look at everything that I've read, which sometimes I like, but sometimes after a while it's like, okay, like let's mix it up
Right.
here.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, and just getting students to think about what the gaps are,
Right.
and a lot of that is, it's interesting because some ways it kind of ties back to like key principles of cinema. Like for me, one of
Yeah.
the most powerful concepts of cinema is montage. When you put one image next to another and you compare them, or that creates this jolt of, at least in the Eisensteinian, conceptualization of montage. You put two images that don't quite make sense together, and that gap, that irritation, is what
Right.
sparks this dialectical, discovery, or an insight on behalf of the audience. And that's such a powerful model. That's such a powerful concept that I try to enact that. I try to point out the gaps, for
Right.
students to be confronted with and think about. So even in presentations, like I've kind of encouraged students to adopt different presentation modes. So it's like, one student is doing a PowerPoint, reading a script. Another is like doing it in a more conversational way. One student even like just filmed herself, as we're doing right now with the webcam, with like no visuals whatsoever. Cause it's like, I don't want my, my audience to be, I don't know, I feel like the visuals are getting in the way, and I would just rather speak to them directly. Like you see me, you
Right.
hear my voice, and what can that afford? People who are making like video essays as opposed to PowerPoints, or these kind of hybrid like platypus like PowerPoints as videos.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's and we line them all up, and now you have this wonderful spectrum of possibilities that each student can be like, oh, okay, you can do it that way, you can do it that way. And so what I love about that is the sort of crowd, it's definitely something about having a crowdsourcing background where, like, I'm asking different people on Twitter for input on a question. That's how Spielberg Face was made. It was like, I need to make a video essay about Spielberg. Anyone have any ideas, like what would be an interesting idea for Spielberg? And that's how I got, like, it
Oh
was
wow. Yeah.
some guy who sent me his article. Like, it was Matt Patches who sent me his article on Spielberg Face. So I wasn't actually the person who invented the Spielberg Face concept, but I adapted it to a video essay, which then
Right.
did really well. So yeah, a way of kind of like knowing what the resources are available to you, or that you can call upon to help you develop your concept, to see what the best options are that you want to pursue. Yeah.
Right.
So, and a lot of that is being able to make critical comparisons and recognitions of, of different, and evaluations of different options. So that's something that I very much believe in, and we practice at every opportunity in the master's program.
Absolutely. And that notion of like not going into a situation expecting or containing complete knowledge, it's
Mm-hmm.
like right in line with, I guess, the Middlebury approach to video essay making, right?
All
Like
right.
you shouldn't go into the video essay. You shouldn't open up Premiere knowing exactly what you're going to do, right? Like you should
Mm,
be using the less you know about what you're going to do, and as you're playing around with Premiere, that is what sparks this creativity and this development of new knowledge, I guess.
right.
So I guess I
Right.
think it's perfectly suited
Yeah.
for that.
Yeah. It gets back to the classic kind of dichotomy of, video essays as being exploratory or explanatory.
Right.
Like I think we've touched on that in the past. And yeah, I'm team exploratory without a doubt. And I think there's
Yeah.
something very powerful about being able to enact an experiential, media practice where your audience they feel like they're discovering it almost in real time along with you. There's something, I think there's something very powerful. Like, you used the word humanistic earlier, and I definitely believe in that. Like, especially in an age of, kind of like artificial intelligence and algorithms kind of dominating our lives in so many ways, and and being confined to like media interfaces and Zoom screens and so much technical filtering. Like, how do we rediscover human experience, human connections? Yeah, and how do we make video essays reconnect to that humanness? which is, I feel, is very precious right now. Yeah, and I connect it also to, there's this term called experience design, which is also very important to me. I mean, traditionally, it's a new media concept. It's meant to describe like user interfaces or VR experiences, but I think that experience design can be applied more broadly to, if to everyday life, like, to see yourself as having the agency. And certainly like Facebook and YouTube definitely promote like, oh yeah, you are now the content creator of your own life, So,
Right.
okay, if that's the case, then how do you approach that with a critical design methodology or ideology in mind? Like, how do you take responsible, conscientious, and critical approaches towards designing the media experiences and artistic research experiences that you then present for others to experience? So
Right.
yeah, so it is about thinking about what kind of experiences you want to share and how do you share them.
I mean, do you think that's a problem uh, in the academic space as well? In the sense that, do we sometimes feel like because on one hand, I think this is what I like most about video essay, in that sometimes in my academic writing, I would feel like there was a subject that I had to write about, like because that was more serious, or it would allow me to, it was the safest argument to make, or I knew that was what the professor wanted. Whereas with video essay, there wasn't that same sense, but I imagine that it does exist elsewhere. So is that, like, I wonder, how do you negotiate that in an academic program, in the sense of
Mm,
like, how do you encourage people to go with the passion project and not the project that they think would be most academically successful? Because I guess inherently there's like a risk there, right? But also,
huh.
how do you, I could imagine a student who is so used to the traditional academic setting not believing you when you say your video essay will be better when you get more personal, take risks, make mistakes, when it's not as, like, maybe not as coherent at times, or it's not like, how do you like get people to like buy into that? Or maybe that's not like, is that something you're thinking about? Or, but I guess if you're enrolling in a master's program, maybe you've already bought in on some level.
I
I
would
don't
hope
know.
that at a master's level, I really would hope at a master's level, people are more invested in, kind of developing their own authorship, and not,
Right.
and not
That's true.
just like, not just reauthoring knowledge that already exists and like, I don't know, adding a little bit of their own insight to it, but really taking more agency. I mean, that's at a bachelor level. Okay, I can go along with the argument that, yeah, students need to learn, useful knowledge just to be functional. Um, I mean, it's amazing because I went to a liberal arts school. I went to Williams, which is very close to Middlebury,
Oh yeah, of course.
and yeah, like I drank the Kool-Aid there, which was like, how do you think for yourself? How do you learn how to learn, like without having to
Right.
receive knowledge and just pass the exam, but really devise your own exams. Um, in hindsight, I've come to learn that, okay, yeah, I was really going to a very elite privileged institution that was basically serving the Illuminati. So, so maybe this knowledge is really like, I mean, I was a scholarship kid. Like I earned my way into there. Not to sound too much like a Republican, but but I got there and I was like, oh my God, these are such powerful tools.
Right.
That they just totally make sense to me, and I'd like to believe that there are tools that could appeal to anyone who just wants to feel like they can take more agency and have more of a role in defining what the stakes are for themselves. But I mean, at the same, that does play into like neoliberalism, which is not a be all and end all. I definitely can see the detrimental effects of neoliberalism and meritocracy. Like, people who like work and hustle are the ones who deserve everything. I do believe in something like equality in the social contract, so that there has to be, and we really have to keep thinking about what's the best configuration of these different ideologies, these different ideals that, on the one hand, everyone should be more empowered to like find their own path to fulfillment and discovery, but at the same time it should not lead to like these economic and social inequalities,
Right.
like it should be the means of a better democracy. It actually gets back to like Emersonian principles, like the enlightened farmer, like that a farmer and a banker should be able to have a really meaningful conversation with each other, because they're both practicing certain principles of educated, enlightened democracy. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what he was smoking, but I was like, yeah, I kind of believe in it. And I mean, I feel like our country needs that more than ever. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
So yeah, so now I kind of lost sight of what your original question was, but
No, I think
but
you've touched on it a little bit.
okay.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that makes complete sense, everything that you're saying. And I think, yeah, like the root of my original question was like, I was just thinking about,
Oh yeah, not everyone's gonna buy into this,
well, I was
and
thinking of,
yeah.
yeah, I was thinking kind of like Zia Anger's My First Film, which is all
Mhm.
about like, she in that talks about how she made her first feature and then like followed all these steps that she thought
Right.
she was taking, and then it's not accepted. And I would imagine that if you enter like I mean, I'm not a I'm not a filmmaker, so
Mhm.
like my sense of this is not completely correct. But I imagine if you entered an MFA or whatever, like your inherent like uh the way you're approaching whatever your final project would be, you on some level are thinking like, I need to do a project that will get me into festivals and will like,
Yeah,
and
right.
so maybe that does not encourage you to like take a risk, which on some level like does make sense, because you can't
Yeah.
just like throw away all this money and time you're spending. But for me, it seems to me that, I know for video essay that risk is so essential. So
Hmm.
like, how do you like, I don't know, like
Well,
I'm asking
yeah.
you to solve a problem that has plagued academia for
Well, it's
hundreds of
funny
years,
that you
but
bring up Zia Anger,
yeah,
because the
yeah,
film. I don't know if you've seen My First Film, but the film that is the subject of My First Film, which was her. Um,
yeah,
oh, it's a very tricky word. I don't want to say. Well, yeah, it was an aborted production that and if you look at it, like the footage that she presents, it's very much wanting to be a Sundance type movie.
right,
Like she,
yeah,
so like she's following that model of what she imagines success is defined as, that she's pursuing. And
right,
in the process, I mean, it fails, by her own statement. But what's so great about My First Film, the performance that has been doing so well, especially in COVID times, is
yeah,
that it's a really amazing criticism of all the factors that would argue against that Sundance model of filmmaking.
right,
Why it's problematic, why it's even like kind of outdated. And then you look at what she did, the way that she presented it, which is like there was no rule book, no school to teach that. Um,
right.
at least not yet. So you
Something tells
know,
me My First Film may be on your syllabus at some point if it
yeah,
can
yeah.
be. Although if
It's
it is,
definitely a
then
case
maybe
study.
it'd be something totally different.
I mean, it's funny because like she came to Merz Academy. I invited her to Merz Academy last year. She gave a workshop, and it was actually for completely selfish reasons, because I wanted to see My First Film. I hadn't seen it yet, so she was basically teaching it in a class of bachelor students, who had no idea how lucky they were. Because
Yeah,
it's just like, um, but yeah,
yeah,
I think that example actually supports my argument for why it's important to be able to think outside the box. And
yeah,
it's interesting because she went to Oberlin, I think, and Oberlin's an amazing school, another liberal arts school, and I think the whole like trajectory of My First Film kind of goes to show like the two paths, like having a great liberal arts education or private school education on the one hand gives you exposure and access to modes of quote unquote successful media and creative practices, like the Sundance model. Like, oh yeah, you went to Oberlin, so now you know the people who could connect you to Sundance. Or maybe it's an and/or, also give you certain critical, or just critical awareness of how to problem solve your way out of those things when they're not working out. Like
Right.
to be able to see new possibilities and new options. At
Right.
least that's something that I definitely carry with me. And in some ways, I'm more drawn to that option than I'm just gonna give you a 3-step process for how to be successful. Like it's so cut and dry. Because I mean, from my own
Right.
experience, I don't find it to be that way. And usually when it is, it actually involves some sort of nepotism, or like it actually has nothing to do with like how hard you work, but it's just like how well connected you are. I mean, I could work on that aspect too, but it's like,
Yeah.
but
No, absolutely. And that work also is such an interesting example, because on one hand it embraces like this, like everything of new media in a way, but
yeah.
also pushes back on the one, like the main thing of new media, and that it's like not, you can't just like go watch it whenever, like it's not
Mm,
available
yes.
online, which is
Right.
like so interesting. And
Yeah.
to your point, like I had a, that to me, that work is the work of 2020 for me,
Mm,
because I saw the live stream, but
mm,
also for the fact that in late 20, in like early 2020 or late, Charlie Shackleton had it on his best video essays of 2019 list, and I think you
mm.
did too.
Yep. Right.
So I'd never seen it because it was just a live performance, but he
Mm,
wanted to talk about it as the film on the podcast. So he and I talked
mhm,
about it without me ever having seen it, which was a
mm.
weird experience. So I just had to read
Mm.
about it.
Huh.
And then it was coming to London. I bought a ticket for the ICA in London. 3 days before I was set to see it, I had to fly home because of COVID, because they canceled the program. I had to fly home. And then like 2 months after that, she started doing the live stream, and I got in on the live stream. So I saw it that way. And so I
Yeah.
think if there's anything about cross media publishing, it seems like
Yeah, absolutely. And
that's the
that just
work.
goes to show, that, and again, that's a perfect example of how the publishing aspect, the exhibition aspect, that is
Right.
in many ways the work. Um,
Right.
I mean, not everyone can do a Zianger piece like that, but it
No.
definitely presents quite vividly what the stakes are, and how important a role it can play. And I feel like it's also a COVID thing, like she
Right.
totally took advantage of the COVID situation where
Right.
everyone's like, oh, what should I be watching now? What should I, all this stuff on Netflix, all these film festivals and museums trying to figure out, it was such a free for all. It was so kind of manic. Like everyone was
Yeah.
just freaking out, trying to figure out, oh, how do I stay visible? And there was something about how she presented the works that it was a rare event. It was time specific, which
Yep.
definitely created a buzz.
Build up in
And
like
then
10 minutes at one point. It was
yeah,
like that.
that
Like I
was
was like,
the light.
email, I
Yeah,
gotta get a ticket. I gotta get a ticket. Yeah.
right. The lightning aspect of it. I mean, there's definitely a
Yeah.
lot to that. And then the actual experience itself, which
Right.
had this intimacy and this consideration for the audience that was very special and very much appreciated and wanted, in a
Right.
time of social isolation.
For
So,
sure.
so yeah, like experience design, the publishing of it, like, it's not enough to make a work, because if you make a work, you've basically produced a commodity that's just going to be on the shelf along with like the countless other commodity products of media that are just waiting to be discovered. And it's like, how do you bring this to life? And that's really where
Right.
the publishing aspect comes in. So it really
Right.
cannot be ignored.
Right. Well, I think we have talked about the program. We've given, I think, people a taste of the Kevin B. Lee they will get if they enroll in this program. So I have one final question, but is there anything else that we haven't covered yet that you wanted to touch on?
Sure. So what is on the Merz Academy website describes the program as it exists now. So just to
Hmm.
make that clear, that this is currently under revision. One important aspect is that there will be likely a greater emphasis on personal mentorship. So students will have greater options for like choosing professors that they would want to personally designate as their advisors or mentors. And
So
this is something that's,
important.
this is very important for me, because it's like if people are coming to work with me or to work with video essays or desktop documentaries or critical media practice, then I want to, make it known that, okay, you do have a greater access to working with me, if you want. So that is important. And the program will be in English, and or German. So like we're trying to make things more accessible from a language standpoint. It is meant to cater to an international student base, and the program has gotten more international over the years. So people shouldn't worry like if their German isn't so great. My German is not so great, so I welcome you to as an ally in just kind of asserting our own kind of language disabilities and making the most of it. Like I don't speak German, but I speak video essays, so I think that's what matters. I see what else is on the so basically and my contact information is on my website, so if people have questions that they want to ask about the program, they can just contact me directly. So it is a program that's in the process of being revised based on the inputs that I want to give, and I think by next year it will be fully or at least the things I'm talking about will be available and in practice for students who really want to go in this direction for their own study and career advancement.
I will say I've already gotten messages from people saying, damn it, why did I already have to do a master's degree? Why can't I, why wasn't this around three years ago? And I count myself in that group. So this is very, very exciting. And I think that mentorship thing is so important. Like, I can't imagine. I was lucky enough to even have good mentors in my master's program, which was not a small liberal arts college like Middlebury. So that I can't imagine us being in school without that. So it's very exciting to see that be such a major emphasis on what you're doing. I
mean, well, no, exactly, because it feeds into the larger question of what really are the necessary and productive elements towards a program. Like I don't take any of this for granted. I'm basically building this program. I'm conceptualizing or evaluating this program from the ground up. It's definitely based on experiences I've had as a grad student and as a professor. Like as a student, what is it that I wish I wanted? As a professor, what is it that I would want students to have? And there's nothing, to my mind, there's nothing more fulfilling than a really fulfilling conversation between individuals, whether two individuals or a group of individuals in a class. Just recently, I was listening to a podcast, 99% Invisible, the host, Roman Mars. I think the topic was about the education and teaching crisis caused by COVID-19. And he had this great point that, to my mind, a true classroom, the ideal classroom is nothing more than a space that facilitates a meaningful conversation between individuals. In a conversation where you feel like, knowledge has really productive, stimulating knowledge has been exchanged, experiences have been exchanged. And it's not just about acquiring knowledge, but also the social bonds produced by shared knowledge. And I think that's really important in the face of the kind of global crisis that we're in. Like, what are the social bonds that we feel are necessary to provide a better life for everyone, so it's knowledge, and also just what knowledge produces in terms of like our relationships to each other. So I think, again, this is why the podcast is so great. Like you've helped generate so many wonderful conversations around this work. And so it's not just like we're all in this like anonymous digital space admiring each other's work from afar. Like you've helped bring people into closer orbits, and and just learning and listening to these amazing conversations it's been great. So I'm really grateful for the chance to be part of that, and being able to share this with you.
Well, thank you. That means a lot, because it was definitely my hope and aspiration that would be true. And I think that's so spot on. Like, I think there was a sense pre-COVID, or at least there was a lot of conversations that I would have with some professors at Middlebury who like to get very philosophical about education, of like, I feel like there was a push. People were like, why can't you just do online school all the time? And I think COVID in many ways has taught us that like so much of the tangible benefits of the university are those social connections that you build by being in the same room together. And I think we took that for granted a lot. So I think going forward, we're just going to crave that even more. And in that vein, my final question is, what do you, Kevin B. Lee, hope to take away from this program? Like, what's your personal goals for, I guess, growth, either as a video essayist, as a teacher, as a mentor, as all three? Like, what's your aspiration? You've talked about what you want students to get out of it, but what do you want to get out of it?
I mean, I guess in a way you can say it's my own version of video essay podcast. Like it's basically my arena where I get to, encounter people who are here presumably because they're invested or very enthusiastic about the form, and they want to learn stuff, and I want to learn stuff from them. And yeah, I also want to be totally blunt to I mean, it sounds a bit like Kanye West, but I want to make some history. Like, I really want a program that can really make a mark on this form as we recognize it, and also can take it into different exciting directions, way beyond simply like a new form of film studies, but really, applying film studies principles, or videographic principles to really regard the world at large, make work that circulates. I want nothing more than students' works to circulate widely and make an impact. I see this as an extension or a next phase of my own practice. I mean, of course, I want to keep making films as well, but I want to do it in a way that's like really aligned and enriched by my teaching practice. So for me, it's very much a next phase of just kind of integrating all the different things I'm involved in, and really giving it a stronger definition and making the most of it. So yeah, so I'm looking forward to welcoming others on this journey. But yeah, maybe some of them will be future guests on your podcast. That would be a fantastic outcome.
I'm sure they will. No, it's very exciting. And some people argued that Kanye West made a video essay this year, right? Like with one of his music videos. I think that was, I've seen some discourse around that. So I guess maybe citing Kanye isn't too out of the box.
Okay. All right. I can have him as a guest speaker then.
Yeah. No, but seriously, this is very exciting. Congratulations in advance. And I really hope people reach out, and who knows, maybe I'll win the lottery and then I can just come hang out in Germany with you and your students all the time. I'm very jealous of people who will have this opportunity, and I'm really excited to see what it does to the field and to the community and stuff, which just continues to, I feel like, just develop new ways of connecting with one another and championing each other's work. So this seems like the perfect venue to do that. So congratulations, and I can't wait to watch your students' video essays
All right.
and share them. So yeah.
All right. Thank you very much, Will.
Absolutely.